Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We are streaming live via YouTube. I'm officially calling, for the record, my name is Judge Tamika West Bernard. I am presiding over the preliminary hearing calendar for this afternoon. I'm officially calling the state of Georgia versus Tarik D. Andrews, warrant number 2022 CW 55407 for the charge of murder. Second charge, warrant number 2022 CW 55408 for the charge of aggravated assault. Third charge, warrant number 2022 CW 55409 for the charge of possession of a firearm during a crime. Fourth charge, I'm sorry, there's three charges. So it'll be a total of three charges. The state is represented by ADA Cheryl Freeman. The defendant, Mr. Andrews, is represented by attorney Tiffany Pleasant. The state is ready. Please call your first witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Detective Montgomery, would you raise your right hand? Do you swear and affirm that the testimony about providing the matter of Tarik Andrews will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
You can lower your hand. Please tell us your name and how you're employed.
My name is Detective Montgomery. I'm employed with the Clayton County Police Department.
How long have you worked with the Clayton County Police Department?
Since 2013.
Detective, as a since you've been working with the Clayton County Police Department, were you assigned the case involving Tarik Andrews and the victim, is it Otelia Andrews?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you assigned to this case on December 4th of 2022?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you part of the police officers who responded to the location of 437 West Side Drive in Jonesboro, Georgia?
Not the initial response, but yes, ma'am. I was contacted later that date.
Did you end up going out to that location?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that a home or an apartment?
It's a home.
Who resided at that home?
According to Mr. Tarik Andrews and Otelia Andrews.
What was the relationship between the two of them?
They were husband and wife.
Okay. From your investigation, Detective, what did you learn that occurred on December 4th of 2022 at their residence?
Officers responded to that scene. Officers responded to that scene in regards to a shooting. Upon arrival, they made contact with Mr. Andrews and the complainant, who was Mr. Biggers. I responded later on to that scene. I observed one spent round on the porch and two live rounds that was marked out by the original officers. I observed Miss Andrews with gunshot wounds, with apparent gunshot wounds, and also observed a firearm on the porch. Mr. Biggers was interviewed, and he advised that he was contacted by Mr. Andrews in regards to the shooting. And when he came over there and seen what had occurred, he was led to the porch, and when he seen what occurred, he contacted police. I spoke to Mr. Andrews in regards to the incident. He said it had been a buildup of arguing between him and his wife. She was telling him about divorce was going to occur, just calling him names and basically belittling him as a father as well. He said at that point, he always keeps a firearm on his hip. He said at some point he snapped. He believed that he shot her 2 times. And at that point, he called Mr. Biggers. Through the investigation, ring surveillance was obtained, as well as surveillance that was on his porch. When reviewing the surveillance, I observed that Mr. Andrews had fired his firearm 3 times. It appeared that he had struck her at least twice. The autopsy is not available at this time yet.
And Detective, from what you were able to see from the cameras and what you observed of Miss Otelia Andrews, was she shot in the front of her person or the back?
She was shot at close range to the front side, very front side, within inches.
At any point in time when you observed that video footage, did Miss Otelia Andrews, did she appear to make any threatening movements towards Mr. Andrews?
No, ma'am. She remained seated throughout the whole incident that I observed from about 9:40, well, really before 9:45, all the way to the incident that occurred. She didn't the verbal that I could hear through the ring, she was just saying, let the lawyers take care of it. And he was repeating you trying to take me for everything that I have.
What is the relationship, if any, between Mr. Biggers and the defendant, Mr. Tarik Andrews?
They're coworkers. I believe that Mr. Biggers may be some kind of legal at the post office. Mr. Andrews works at the post office because Mr. Andrews was stating something about he didn't want to commit suicide because he didn't want to leave his kids without anything. So he said he contacted a friend. I believe he was referring to Mr. Biggers.
Was Mr. Biggers the individual who contacted the police?
Yes, ma'am.
Was Miss O.T. Andrews pronounced dead on the scene?
Yes, ma'am. I was not there when she was pronounced by the ME, but yes, ma'am.
Was Mr. Andrews read his Miranda warning prior to making the statements about what happened?
Yes, ma'am. He was read as Miranda, and it was recorded visually and audibly.
Was the firearm he used recovered?
Yes, ma'am. It was recovered the day of, and it's been sent off for testing.
Did this occur in Clayton County?
Yes, ma'am. It occurred at 437 West Side Drive, Jonesboro, Georgia, 30238.
What type of weapon was this that was used?
Glock firearm and handgun.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Okay, Attorney Pleasant, your witness.
Thank you. Who was the initial responding officer?
I believe it was
Montgomery.
Officer Lamb and his PO. I had to look at the report to get her name. I don't know her personally. Ross. I believe it was Lamb and Ross.
Okay. To your knowledge, did Officer Lamb or Officer Ross question my client, Mr. Andrews?
To my knowledge, he only made the spontaneous utterances to them. I don't believe any of them questioned him.
And do you have knowledge of what the alleged spontaneous utterances entailed?
Not directly from them. From what I heard on surveillance, he said, I did it. He not the one referring to Mr. Biggers because they were both asked to put their hands up because of the nature of the call when the officers arrived.
Okay, so Mr. Biggers and Mr. Andrews were initially taken handcuffed?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Was Mr. Biggers charged with anything?
No, ma'am.
To your knowledge, do Officer Lamb and Officer Ross wear a body-worn camera?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And to your knowledge, is there recording equipment camera inside of the patrol car that they utilize?
A lot of vehicles are. I can't speak directly to their vehicles.
Okay, so are you aware of any video that's been uploaded into your system with regards to this case?
I haven't reviewed the body cams at this time.
Okay. And now, are you aware of whether or not law enforcement's been called to that location previously?
He informed me of a domestic, I believe, when Miss Andrews was arrested. I can't recall the date, but I did research something and I seen something that had occurred.
Was it recent?
I can't recall the date.
Okay.
But it was a domestic of some nature. I believe she was arrested.
Now the interview, 1 second, please. Oh. My apologies. The interview that you conducted under Miranda for my client, Mr. Andrews, was that at the police headquarters?
I conducted one at the police headquarters and then an additional one at the jail, Clayton County Jail.
Okay. When did you go see him at the jail?
It was the Monday after, I believe, because the incident occurred on a Saturday. If I'm mistaken, let me check the date. So I was on call. The initial incident occurred on a Saturday going into Sunday. Then I went and spoke to him Monday when I returned to work.
And did you reread him as Miranda at the jail?
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Is that recorded as well?
Yes, ma'am.
And what additional information were you seeking at the jail on Monday?
He provided me with the surveillance, clarity on the case on certain questions I had. And also he provided me the surveillance passcode.
Any other witnesses that you've spoken to besides Mr. Biggers and Mr. Andrews?
Not witnesses, no, ma'am.
Okay. Any other individuals with relevant information for this case that you've spoken to besides Mr. Andrews and Mr. Biggers?
The only other people I spoke to was his son, and it wasn't any questions into like previous history.
Okay. Was his son home at the time that this alleged incident occurred?
No, ma'am. He, according to Mr. Andrews, had just moved out like a month or so ago.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's all I have, Your Honor.
Okay, 8A Freeman, do you have any other witnesses?
No, Your Honor, the state rests.
Okay, Attorney Pleasant, do you have any witnesses?
No, Your Honor. Defense rests and will submit on the testimony.
Okay. Okay,
Thank you, Your Honor. May Detective Montgomery be excused.
yeah, so just for the record, I'm bounding over the 3 charges to Superior Court of murder, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, and being in a possession of a weapon. I'm sorry, that's the previous case.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Judge.
Yes.
Thank you, Detective. You're excused.
Mr. Andrews, that will conclude your preliminary hearing for this morning or this afternoon. Thank you. Okay, we're ready to call the next case on the calendar, that being the state of Georgia versus Ezekiel Maurice Calhoun.
Yes, Your Honor, and that's with Officer Ramos. Officer Ramos, if you can hear me, you can turn your video on and unmute yourself.
Yes, hey, how you doing?
Hello.
Okay, so let me officially call the case here. I'll put the warrant numbers on the record. So position 24 on the calendar, state of Georgia versus Ezekiel Maurice Calhoun, warrant number 2022 WA 18358 for the charge of burglary. Second charge, warrant number 2022 WA 18359 for the charge of criminal damage in the second degree. So there are 2 charges pending against defendant Mr. Calhoun. The state of Georgia represented by ADA Cheryl Freeman, and the defendant will be represented by attorney Tiffany Pleasant. Your case, ADA Freeman.
Thank you, Your Honor. Officer Ramos, would you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear and affirm that the testimony about to provide in the matter of state of Georgia versus Ezekiel Calhoun will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
You can lower your hand. Please tell us your name and how you're employed.
My name is Officer Ramos with the Forest Park Police Department.
How long have you worked with the Forest Park Police Department?
About 2 years.
Sir, were you employed with the Forest Park Police Department on December 2nd of 2022?
Yes.
On that particular day, did you respond to 4649 Burks Road in reference to a burglary call?
Yes.
When you arrived at that location, who did you make contact with?
We made contact with the caller, and he stated that when he drove by his residence, he saw a black male standing on the steps in the it was like a guest house in the backyard, and he didn't know who the guy was. So that's when he called us out there to go find out who was on his shed in the backyard. So when we arrived, we didn't see Mr. Calhoun outside, so we made entry into the shed, and we saw Mr. Calhoun standing inside the shed with a guest house with a laptop in his hand.
And also, Ramos, let me go back real quick. You said the caller, is that Jamal Troutman?
Yes.
Is he the owner of the residence?
Yes, he's the owner of the property.
Okay, let's I just want to be clear. So, because at one point you said guest house and then you were saying shed.
Well, it's like a guest house, but from the outside almost like a shed, but it has like a kitchen and stuff like that in it. So I guess you just would call it a guest house.
Okay. And so tell us, what did Mr. Troutman, what did he indicate that he saw Mr. Calhoun doing?
He just said he was driving by his property, and when you drive by the property, you could basically see straight through the backyard and you can see the guest house. So he said he saw a black male sitting on the steps of his guest house, and he didn't know who it was. So that's why he called us out there to come figure out who that guy was standing in his backyard.
When you arrived there, what did you observe Mr. Calhoun doing?
He was inside the residence on his laptop, and he was just standing in there. And I asked him what he was doing, and he kept saying that it was his house, and he owns the house, and he's just making sure everything is working in the house.
Did Mr. Troutman indicate whether or not he knew Mr. Calhoun?
He said he'd never seen him ever in his life, and he basically said I don't know, he didn't know the guy at all.
And did he say whether or not he had given permission to Mr. Calhoun to be in his residence?
No, he said he didn't give him permission.
Did you go inside of the residence where Mr. Calhoun was found standing?
Yes.
What did you observe inside of that residence?
I observed the heaters were damaged, and it was vacant. There was no furniture in there. I just observed some damage within the residence, and that's when I asked Mr. Troutman, was that damage always there? He stated that he was at the residence last night to prepare the house for people to come by the house, and he said none of that stuff was damaged the night before. And Mr. Troutman, later on, I read him his Miranda rights, and I asked him about the damage. He said he did take it apart because he wanted to see if something was wrong with the heater system.
When you say that he did take it apart, what exactly did he take apart?
It was the I don't know the exact name. It's the heaters that they have in the old houses that sit on the floor. He took that apart, and the copper was disattached from the wall frame, and they were all sprawled out across the floor. And then I found a butcher knife on the floor next to the heater that was damaged with the cut copper. And Mr. Calhoun stated that yes, it was. He found the knife, and he used the knife to go through the back window to open up the window to get inside the residence.
Okay. Was there any damage to the plumbing system?
From what Mr. Troutman said, he said that the water wasn't working, and he needed to go underneath the house to actually go see if the water was working. But he said more likely out of 10 that he did something to damage the water system because now it's not working. And Mr. Calhoun did admit that he did go down there to look at the water system.
Was Mr. Troutman able to provide an estimate for the damage that was done to his property?
I believe it was over 1,500. I'm not sure the exact amount, but I know it was over 1,500.
This happened in Clayton County?
Yes.
One other thing, you stated that Mr. Calhoun stated that he he entered the residence through a back window?
Yes.
Was that back window damaged?
Not from what I witnessed, but he said he used a knife to pluck it open.
Did you take photos of the damage that was done to the residence?
Yes.
Thank
you. I have no further questions.
Okay, Attorney Pleasant, your witness.
So, Officer Ramos, have you subsequently been provided with any documentation for replacement for these units that you are alleging were damaged?
No, Mr. Troutman did not give me any document.
Okay. And your conversation with Mr. Calhoun, was that under Miranda?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you wear a body-worn camera?
Yes, ma'am.
Was the conversation under Miranda captured on your body-worn camera?
Yes, ma'am.
When you were speaking with my client, how did he appear?
He probably didn't seem like he was mentally all the way there. But that's really about it. I don't know if he was on any drugs or anything.
When you say mentally all the way there, can you?
I've had other numerous incidents with him throughout the city, so this is not my first time coming in contact with him.
Okay.
And there's been times where I've talking to him, and he'll talk about random things that doesn't make any sense. So that's why I kind of knew when talking to him, something was kind of off with him.
Okay.
And the fact that he was sitting here, admitting like, yeah, I was, that's my house. I own the house. And it's like, you don't own the house. So that's made me kind of feel like something was wrong with him. And he was adamant about that he owned the house.
Okay.
So
you have prior knowledge of where he resides? Based on
I don't know where he resides, but I see him walk around the city a lot.
Okay. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, any redirect ADA Freeman?
No, Your Honor, the state rests.
Okay, do you have any witnesses, Attorney Pleasant?
No, Your Honor, just Vince rests and will submit.
Okay, based on that, the charges of burglary and criminal damage to property will be bounded over to Superior Court. That will conclude the preliminary hearing for Mr. Calhoun, and I want to thank both parties for their presentation of the case.